I came back from a peaceful weekend fishing trip expecting silence and squirrels. Instead, I found a 40-foot wedding tent in my backyard, Karen in pearls yelling at a florist, and some guy in a tux peeing behind my azalea bush. No warning. No permission. Just 25 folding chairs trampling my lawn and a harpist tuning up where my grill used to be. Karen, queen of the HOA and destroyer of joy, stood with a clipboard, waving like she'd done me a favor. Oh good, you're back. Your grass was the only one up to code. This is the ideal wedding lawn. We couldn't possibly use Sandra's, she has crabgrass. She said this while standing on my patio furniture. It wasn't just a lawn. My tool shed was converted into a dressing room. My garden hose was coiled next to a bucket of champagne. And every single car in my driveway had a reserved for wedding party sign. One of them had deflated heart balloons tied to the mirrors. The bride's uncle winked at me like we were co-conspirators. I briefly considered setting my own house on fire and disappearing. I asked Karen what the hell she was thinking. She laughed and said, "Community spirit. You'll thank me when you see the gift basket." Gift basket? Karen thought she could buy me off with a candle and a thank you card? For context, this is the same woman who once fined me $50 because my Halloween pumpkin had too scary of a face. I'd spent years biting my tongue. The lawn gnome incident. The time she accused my dog of violating the noise ordinance with a single bark. The 8-page violation letter over unapproved curtain color. That turned out to be a shadow. She wasn't a neighbor. She was a dictator with a printer. But this was new. This was her crossing my property line and declaring it hers with flower petals and swan-shaped ice sculptures. She'd hijacked my home, disrespected every inch of my personal space, and now expected gratitude. I stood there for a solid 30 seconds without saying a word. Not angry. Not yelling. Just perfectly still, like a man watching someone climb into a bear trap labeled, "I dare you." Karen, misreading my silence, smiled wider. "You don't mind, do you?" I did mind. I minded so hard it made my teeth itch. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw a fit. I nodded slowly, said, "Sure," and walked into my house like a man who just decided to commit glorious social arson. Because if Karen wanted a wedding on my lawn, she was getting one she'd never forget. I sent one text. Just one. It said, "You ever crash a wedding?" Within 15 minutes, I got a skull emoji, a thumbs up, and the words, "We ride at dawn." That was enough. The asphalt vultures owed me a favor. Long story short, I once accidentally saved their clubhouse during a bar brawl by ducking at the exact right time and letting two rival gang members knock each other out cold. They called it fate. I called it lucky clumsiness. Either way, a debt was owed. And I was cashing it in. Karen's daughter was mid-rehearsal when they showed up. 20 motorcycles. Black leather. Sunglasses darker than a tax audit. One of them had a boombox duct taped to the back of his bike blasting something that made the harpist shriek and clutch her pearls. The mother of the bride fainted into the shrimp cocktail tray. I welcomed them with open arms. Introduced them to my backyard as their new temporary clubhouse. Gave them permission to park wherever. Including on Karen's handmade welcome sign. They brought grills. They brought kegs. They brought a guy named Chainsaw Dave, who didn't even own a chainsaw. It was just a vibe. Karen came stomping across the lawn like an angry swan in heels, shrieking that they were ruining her daughter's special day. I told her this was still my property, and I could host whatever party I wanted. She screamed that it was a formal wedding. I pointed to the HOA bylaws that said residents may host gatherings of any personal nature, up to 75 guests. She should know. She wrote the clause. The harpist tried to keep playing. One of the bikers plugged in a portable amp and started shredding a guitar solo so loud it made the cake vibrate. The music duel lasted 4 minutes. The harpist fled crying. Meanwhile, the vultures were making themselves very comfortable. They set up a makeshift bar. Someone fired up a smoker. The flower girl was now wearing a biker vest and fist-bumping a guy named Tank. One of the bridesmaids wandered over for a drink and never came back. The best man took a photo with a guy who had a tattoo of a flaming squirrel on his forehead. Karen pulled me aside and hissed, "You've ruined everything." I smiled. "Just exercising my community spirit." She tried to call the cops. They showed up, saw the property line, and realized it was a civil matter. The officer looked at the situation, looked at me, then looked at Karen and said, "This your event?" When she said yes, he nodded and walked back to his cruiser. He didn't want any part of it. Smart man. The tension was thick as barbecue smoke. Guests on one side clutching gift bags and plates of fancy appetizers, trying to figure out if this was still a wedding or a hostage situation. Bikers on the other side doing shots out of garden gnome hats. It was beautiful. Then came the best part. Cactus Mike, a biker with a beard like a Viking and a voice like gravel poetry, locked eyes with the bride during a toast. She was supposed to be listening to her dad talk about eternal love and golf memberships. But she only had eyes for Mike. They started talking. Laughing. Then she slipped off her heels, hiked up her dress, and walked straight into the biker circle. Karen screamed like she'd been stabbed in the HOA handbook. I sipped my lemonade and watched as her daughter climbed on the back of Mike's bike. He handed her a helmet covered in hand-painted roses. Then they rode off together. Literally. Karen collapsed into a chair. One of the vultures offered her a pulled pork sandwich. She slapped it out of his hand. He just shrugged and got another one. The wedding was technically still happening. But now it was more of a block party from hell. People started taking sides. Half the guests were dancing with bikers. The other half were calling their Ubers and questioning their life choices. The vultures brought out their own wedding cake, 3 tiers, entirely made of donuts. It was a hit. Karen tried to rally. She called her HOA emergency meeting group chat. No one responded. Everyone was too busy watching 2 biker chicks have a dance-off next to the koi pond. I leaned on my fence and watched the whole thing unravel like a perfectly knit sweater yanked by a dog. No shouting. No threats. Just pure, delicious, lawful chaos. Exactly how I planned it. Karen tried to regroup by bringing in a celebrity wedding planner she found on social media. The guy arrived in a white linen suit and acted like he was rescuing royalty from a garbage fire. He tried to coordinate with the bikers, who were busy playing lawn darts with steak knives and empty beer cans. When he asked for silence for the vow rehearsal, someone fired up a chainsaw, not because they needed it, just because it was Tuesday. The planner left in tears after 10 minutes and was last seen muttering something about canceling his career. Karen's panic hit critical mass when her own HOA board turned on her. Most of them were already enjoying the biker party. One guy said it was the most fun he'd had since his divorce. Another was getting a tattoo of a flamingo riding a motorcycle on his calf. I didn't even know he had calves. Turns out retirement looks different when you're 4 beers in and someone dares you to spin a keg. Then came the paperwork. Biker lawyer, also known as Frank Knuckles Carmichael, pulled out a packet of documents that had more footnotes than a tax audit. Turns out, thanks to a technicality in Karen's own HOA charter, any property under dispute defaults to owner rights during active events. Which meant, as long as the biker party continued, Karen had no authority. She had signed off on that clause herself 5 years ago while trying to ban bounce houses. The irony could have powered a small town. She tried to counter it with another clause about community image, but Frank casually mentioned that her citations for curtain color had already triggered a class action lawsuit from 5 residents. He handed her a cease and desist letter with a smile. She crumpled it and tossed it into a nearby margarita blender. Someone gave her a golf clap. The bride didn't come back. Cactus Mike posted a photo of the two of them eating gas station tacos with the caption, "Found my real ride or die." Comments exploded. Apparently, Karen's daughter had been miserable for years and saw this as divine intervention. The groom looked too stunned to be heartbroken. He quietly drank with the groomsmen, then wandered off muttering something about joining a monastery. The wedding cake melted in the sun. No one noticed. Everyone was too busy watching the bikers set up a giant slip-and-slide made from tarps and dish soap. A priest who had come to officiate ended up blessing a baby biker in a beer cooler. He called it a spiritual experience. Karen was spiraling. She tried to rally her remaining supporters, but they were sitting in inflatable chairs, holding barbecue ribs, and watching an impromptu arm wrestling tournament between two grandmas and a guy named Bone Crusher. The party had completely absorbed the wedding. No one cared about centerpieces anymore. They cared about who could shotgun a beer while hanging upside down from a tree swing. She made one final desperate move, brought in a drone to capture aerial footage of the disaster for HOA records. It lasted 2 minutes before someone lassoed it out of the sky with a garden hose and fed it to a grill. The smell of burning plastic added to the ambience. Someone made custom shirts. On the front, "I survived the HOA wedding war." On the back, "Karen doesn't rule this block." They sold out within an hour. Even the mailman bought one. By the end of the day, Karen looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her voice was hoarse from yelling. Her pearls had snapped during an argument with a teenager playing air guitar. Her fancy heels were in the koi pond. She sat alone in a lawn chair, surrounded by the rubble of what was supposed to be the perfect suburban wedding. I offered her a lemonade. She refused. I offered her a donut from the biker cake. She swatted it away. I ate it anyway. Victory always tastes better with sprinkles. Karen's last move was cutting the power to the entire block. She knew the main breaker was technically on her property, and she figured if she couldn't have her perfect wedding, no one was getting music, lights, or even a cold beer. 5 minutes later, she was smugly sipping sparkling water, thinking she'd won something. She hadn't. The bikers had brought their own generator. Actually, 3. They hotwired one into my house, another into the smoker, and a third into the amplifiers. The music roared back louder than ever. Karen's smug smile vanished faster than her authority. Then the real chaos started. One of the bikers figured out how to override Karen's sprinkler system. He rerouted the pressure valves, redirected the flow, and programmed it to spray directly into the tent every 30 seconds. The timing was perfect. The sprinkler went off right as Karen stood up to deliver a screechy apology speech. She got blasted square in the face with a full-pressure jet of recycled rainwater and fertilizer. The tent collapsed soon after. The structure, already loosened from the earlier slip-and-slide run, gave up under the weight of the water. Fabric, folding chairs, and soggy charcuterie went flying. Guests screamed. One guy caught a flying shrimp skewer to the ear. Nobody was seriously hurt, but it was dramatic enough for someone to yell, "Call the news!" And someone did. A local community blog posted live updates, and by sunset, #HOA wedding crash was trending in 3 counties. The caption that went viral: Karen tried to host a wedding in someone else's yard. They brought bikers. The yard won. That was the nail in the coffin. Karen stood in the middle of her wrecked dream party, soaked, shrieking, and ignored. Her guests had either left, joined the bikers, or passed out from too much smoked meat. Her HOA allies were nowhere to be found. Someone offered her a towel. She threw it on the ground. The next day, a notice went out. Karen resigned as HOA president, citing mental exhaustion, irreparable stress, and betrayal by her own neighborhood. She tried to save face by saying she was moving to a gated community with stricter rules. We all knew she got laughed off her own street. A week later, the neighborhood held a vote. I was elected HOA president by unanimous decision. Technically, I didn't even campaign. People just handed me ballots and beer. My first act was to repeal every nonsense citation Karen ever issued. Lawn gnomes were now mandatory. Flamingos were encouraged. Trash bins could be visible as long as they didn't have human remains in them. We put up a community sign. This is a judgment-free lawn zone. The asphalt vultures became the unofficial neighborhood watch. Turns out, people don't speed when a biker gang with matching leather jackets is patrolling in lawn chairs. Crime dropped. Potlucks got louder. Kids learned how to fix engines before they hit puberty. Property values stayed oddly stable. Every time a new neighbor moved in, we handed them two things: a welcome basket and the full story of the wedding. Printed. Laminated. With photos. We even framed the original HOA citation that started it all. It hangs in my garage with a title plaque. In loving memory of Karen's reign. As for the bride and Cactus Mike, they sent a postcard from the desert. Married by a guy dressed as Elvis. She said she never wanted a pearl and lace wedding. She just hadn't known how to say no to her mom. Now she rides motorcycles, writes poetry, and runs a taco truck. Sometimes I sit on my porch with a cold drink, watching the bikers teach neighborhood kids how to do burnouts with tricycles. I think about Karen, wherever she ended up, clutching her HOA binder like it still means something. I smile. She wanted perfection. I gave her freedom. She just didn't recognize it when it rolled up in a leather vest and revved an engine.